I'm Harvey Wendell,
And I'm Tiffany Jones.
and this is Backyard Dollars. Tiffany, thank you for coming out. I definitely appreciate it. It's been a while since we spoke, since we last seen each other.
I know, right?
It's
Decades.
decades, yeah. You don't have to say that. You don't have to say
I
it in
know,
a decade.
right?
So, Tiffany, you've got a lot of titles. You're a real estate agent. You're a credit professional, and then I did see that you have some speaking engagements coming up, so you're a speaker as well. So, how busy and hectic is your schedule?
So my schedule is busy. I affectionately like to just go and I would say I'm just a realtor. Like I sell real estate. I sell realtor, realtors.
Okay.
So everything else is just it happens along the way. And usually my day starts at 5 a.m. And
Okay.
then I would love for it to end around 7, but last night it ended at like 10:30. So
5 AM to 10:30.
yeah,
That's a
so
full day.
that's
That's
a
a
full day.
So what's your hometown? Where are you from?
So I am from the great city of Detroit
Okay. Awesome.
and born and raised here.
Mhm.
Now I'm in Toledo.
I'm sorry, what?
Now I'm in Toledo, but
You live in Toledo.
I live in I live in Toledo, but I will forever be and I serve the Detroit area. So my business is 50-50.
Okay, you live in Toledo, but where did you graduate college?
Go Blue. The University of Michigan, Ann Arbor
Okay.
for undergrad, and then I did Wayne State for grad school.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
And so you're licensed in real estate in both Michigan and in Ohio?
Yes. So I'm licensed in Michigan, the state of Michigan, and then I'm also licensed in Ohio.
What is your major? Because you undergrad at U of M and then grad at Wayne State. So what were your majors?
So I did sociology. I majored in sociology
Okay.
with a minor in African studies from University of Michigan. For grad school, I was always interested in business,
Okay.
numbers. I ended up majoring in accounting.
Okay.
So I did that.
Is that where you went right after college?
Uh,
You got into accounting or did you go into real estate right afterwards?
So after college, it was a kind of an interesting process for me. Initially, I was interested in public health in undergrad. So I took a year off. I was studying for the GRE and applying only to University of Michigan for grad school.
Okay.
And then I didn't get in. I took a year off. And during that time, I studied for the GMAT and decided to go the route. It was either between accounting or finance. And I
Okay.
went the accounting route and I actually worked in public accounting. So I spent 3 years working at public accounting firms and as an external auditor. So,
So that that has helped you a lot in the real estate lane, has it not?
so it did actually, and that was my open door. So when
Okay.
I left public accounting, I took a job at a independent brokerage. So locally here in the Detroit metro area, I took a job there, and I came in the door, and it was just like, okay, we're going to have you just managing our books, running kind of the operations solely for I thought was the brokerage.
Okay.
Then shortly after being there, the owner said, "Well, we have an acquisitions company and we have a property management company, and I think you can do three. I think you can run all three." And I'm like, "Huh?
Okay.
What?" So that was and I did, and we opened offices, we closed offices. I learned so much, and during that process, he said, why don't you get your real estate license?" And in 2017, I took the class,
Okay.
and I sat on it for 2 years. I was like, "Okay." And then in 2019, I took the Michigan exam, and I passed it on the first try. That was like I couldn't believe it. I passed on the first try, and that was 2019, and it was history from there.
You just took off.
So I am still taking off.
I
So
it sounds like it.
it's a
Yeah.
process, but
It's
I will say that each year it gets better. So I'm growing.
when you before you got into real estate, when you were you renting your home or did you purchase at the time, or did you not purchase until after you were in real estate?
So I didn't purchase my first home until after I was in real estate.
Okay.
And my husband and I, we purchased our first home together. So my husband's from Toledo,
Okay.
and we moved to Toledo, and literally like 2 weeks before COVID like broke out and shut everything down, we moved to Toledo. And he said, "Well, Tiffany, I think it would be a great time for you to just go ahead and study for the Ohio exam because there's no reciprocity." So Michigan does not have reciprocity where I can go into another state and say, "Hey, I've taken my exam, I passed. Can I get
Oh, you
basically"
gotta take another
I have
test
to
and
tell
everything
and
out
it's
there.
it's it's completely different. You have, like, the federal portion, and I definitely think I'm using the wrong word when I say federal, but, like, there's a main portion of the exam that's the same over all 50 states.
Okay,
And then you have other state laws that are a little bit different.
okay.
So I had to take everything over, and it was a whole process, and I did that during COVID, and I passed that exam first time, and then I started selling in both.
So then I have a question here, because during the when the housing market tanked years ago,
Yes.
Michigan and Florida were running neck and neck as far as uh, foreclosures, because a lot of Michigan residents own property in Florida. And so they had to let their Florida homes go and trying to keep the Michigan home. And then sometimes they would lose the Michigan home too. So Michigan and Florida were neck and neck at that time. Are you seeing a huge difference as far as the market goes in Ohio and Michigan? Is there one that's more of a buyer's and one that's more of a seller's type, or is it about the same with those 2?
So we're considered a seller's market in both states.
Okay,
This is very much so a seller's market. When we look at what we would call a balanced market, you're looking at about 6 months worth of inventory. So there's 6 months worth of homes out there and homes for buyers to purchase, right? So on average, right now in Toledo, the market is less expensive. So it's much more affordable. The
wow,
average price point in Ohio is like around 150,000 in the Lucas County, which is where Toledo is. So
okay,
Toledo is like I believe the fourth largest city in the state of Ohio. So they're right at the border of Michigan, but you have a lot of investors from California, from the East Coast coming and purchasing a lot of properties. So from an investment standpoint, and this is actually from an investment standpoint, a lot of people are coming and like swooping in and purchasing properties because they're so cheap. And I would say a few years back before they finished Little Caesars Arena, and they started really building up and revitalizing some of the other areas within the city of Detroit,
hmm,
you had a lot of people coming in buying properties up, and so now within Toledo, it's definitely even more competitive because the market is so much more affordable. So, a house that you could get in certain higher end communities within Toledo with $350,000, $400,000,
hmm,
you're talking about a six to $700,000 house in Michigan.
is
If
now,
you're comparing school districts apples to apples as
okay,
well.
okay,
So if you look at it, kind of like that. So, and I mean, when you think about it, like we're 45 minutes away in Toledo from Ann Arbor. So you are so close. You're an hour and 5 minutes from or 10 from downtown Detroit. Like it's a hub and you have the big 3. You have the Jeep plant that's there in Toledo. So,
that's true.
it's a lot of people that actually travel, interesting enough.
Are they buying in mass like they are in Detroit? Because there are a lot of properties, especially in the downtown area and in the Greektown area too. th- They hit the market. Next thing you know, there's like 14 people on it, and you're trying to outbid someone like crazy. Is it the same type of bidding war kind of thing in Toledo, or because of its affordability, not as aggressive?
It is the same.
Okay.
So, over the past, like, month, I had 3 listings that sold, and all of those sold within a day. Like, within a day, we were under contract, a day or 2. And
Wow.
so, I would say that in any area, there is kind of a cookie cutter model that a seller would wanna use if they're thinking about selling a home and marketing to a first-time home buyer, let's say, for example.
Okay.
But then when you're looking at investment properties and they're looking at, okay, how much is the rent going for? What is the return on my investment? And they're looking at things a little bit differently. When it's occupied, the condition may not be moving ready because they don't care, but does the price and the rental potential or income that I get, if that makes sense, I'm all game. So even the rentals they don't stay on the market. And unfortunately, people in Toledo and locals that are buying a home for the first time are competing with investors from out of state that can pay cash.
Okay.
So when you're talking about a first time home buyer, you have FHA or, you have a VA loan or you have a conventional loan competing with somebody that can close in 2 weeks cash. And they're still bidding over, or, it's so you're experiencing the same thing in both markets.
So, as a first-time homebuyer then, that sounds frustrating. It sounds like I want this property, but obviously my pockets aren't as deep as this corporation,
Right,
obviously. So, if you have the everyday 9 to 5er, they're working and they're looking into purchasing their first home. And maybe it's not even their first home. Maybe they lost a home where they relocated, but they're looking into buying yet another home
okay.
for their family. What suggestions or advice do you have for them? Because it sounds like I want to buy in this area, but so does ABC Incorporated,
Right.
and they've got more money than who knows. So, what do you tell someone who is interested in buying a home and knowing that they're up against corporation?
So, I will always lead with what's for you is gonna be for you. I lead
Okay.
with that. So, ultimately, I have a soft spot for first-time home buyers. I absolutely, love working with people that are ready and eager to just follow the process and to say, "Okay, I'm willing." If you're willing to trust me, I tell my clients, "If you're willing to trust me, I've yet to have a buyer that really wanted to purchase a home that is not in a home."
Okay.
So the process may have a couple twists and turns, but my purpose here is to help navigate and make that as smooth as possible. Whether I'm working for the seller, whether I'm working for the buyer, a very smooth process for you. And so essentially, you have to pack a little bit of patience sometimes, but you also have to be willing to do the work. So your expectations, and they usually adjust after we look at the first 1 to 3 houses. I always say, like I had one recently, she's like, "Oh, I'm kinda nervous." And I say, "We're gonna knock the edge off." After we look at one, and then you'll kinda get an idea, okay, like, this is what I said I wanted,
Mhm.
but this what I really want? Am I willing to adjust my criteria, right? Because I'm always gonna start with the pre-approval first. If we don't have the pre-approval, then we're shooting in the dark. I'm not gonna waste your time, I'm not gonna waste mine. We're gonna work from a place called reality. This is
So
what you
so it
can
sounds like
afford.
that pre-approval is crucial instead of just somebody saying, "Hey, I wanna buy a house," there's no pre-approval.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah, yeah,
it's like, "Oh, okay, so what are we doing here?" You know?
yeah.
It's like, I mean, honestly, it's like, I don't know. I don't even know. Like, you look at another profession and you're just like walking in the door and you're saying, "I wanna get my taxes prepared," and they ask for your papers and you say, "I don't have any."
Mm,
So what are we
yeah,
doing?
they'd be prepared. So then does that goes into putting in the work.
Absolutely.
That goes into putting in the work.
Absolutely.
So with the pre-approval, obviously that's important. Now, let's say I get pre-approved for $300,000.
Okay.
Some people say, "Well, I have to use all that 300,000." Is that the case, or can you find them something nice? We can stick somewhere like 220, and then of course the bidding war might begin, and you still might be at your pre-approval of 300. So do I have to use all of that, or just some of it?
That's a great question. So when you get ready to purchase, I'm here to help you navigate through the process, but it's gonna be completely up to what makes you comfortable. So, I mean, if I take a step back, like, budgets they just get me excited. I love budgets. I love working budgets. I love looking at spreadsheets, and even though I'm selling real estate, for me, it always starts with the numbers, and numbers don't lie.
Correct.
So what can you afford? And that's why it's important. And I tell all of my clients, especially my first time home buyers, you need to have a budget, because a lender can tell you you can afford a $300,000 house. But does that make you feel comfortable when you look at your budget? And then you want to have money in there for an emergency fund. Because whether I'm working with a client that is building new construction,
Mhm.
or it's somebody that's purchasing an historical district and it's a 100-year-old property, you need to make sure you have money put aside for unexpected and expected things that you want to do. So if you want to use the whole amount, perfectly fine. If you don't, that's perfectly fine too. And we'll let the house define where you decide to truly fall. Because sometimes the intention is, I'm only going to use 250 of that three. And then they
Okay.
find a house that they really, really like, and they're like, I'm going to go for the gusto.
Okay.
So you just want to look at the numbers and say, what what mortgage payment am I comfortable with?
So when we talk about a budget, there are a couple things that we do have to consider. And back when I was in high school, I want to say I was 17 and 18, I wanted to buy a car. I wanted to buy this Audi. but I had to come up with a budget. I had to come up with a game plan. So I found for me, I had to first be honest with myself as to what I can afford and what I can't afford. And then I had to look into the maintenance costs because I found that a lot of times just because you can afford the car doesn't mean you can afford the car.
Mhm.
Okay. So when coming up with a budget and you're wanting to purchase a house, we also have to look at taxes though too, because there are some people, the numbers are right, the mortgage is right, but then here's these taxes. And then
Absolutely.
we have to reassess these taxes. So just because someone can afford the mortgage, the area that they're in, the taxes keep going up or the taxes fluctuate. How can I prepare myself for that?
That is a really good question. I would definitely say you wanna leave wiggle room
Okay.
in your budget, and you also want to consider, as you mentioned, you can afford to purchase the house, but can you truly afford to maintain it, right?
Mhm.
You have a roof, you have you know what I'm saying? Like, depending on if it has wood, then you have to get your wood treated, you have to constantly repaint it every so many
Especially if it's
years.
not a new construction build, like you
It's
said.
not, but even with new construction properties, and they do come a lot of times with home warranties, there still may be some things depending on the quality of the build. Some people
Yeah.
decide they're gonna purchase new construction and they forego a private inspection.
Oh,
If you are purchasing a property and you forego the private inspection, then you don't really know kind of like to get an idea of what to expect, right? Like, well, I know I have this much time left because I know people that purchase new construction homes and the whole community was getting a new roof put on within the first 10 years. And I know that because my friend's dad owned the roofing company and he was coming through and replacing roofs. And we found out, in some scenarios that the insulation wasn't installed properly or that it was the lack thereof. So a private inspection is really important. And it's really going to help you as a home buyer really guide you through, okay, what do I need to expect to prepare for?
mhm.
You know what I mean? And kind of a honey to-do list of what to do around the home. But can you afford to heat it? Let's not even get to home repairs. Can you afford in Michigan and Ohio to pay the heating bill in the wintertime? Can you afford the AC at the hot, the peak of summer? Are you walking around with the house with AC and you're running the fans? Everybody's sweating. Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful.
Exactly.
Everybody's sweating. Then, like, sprinkler systems. Do you have a really large yard? Can you afford to replace it, maintain it, get it blown out, get it
Yeah.
turned on? Like, all of the things I can go down the list of. If you have a homeowners association, those may fluctuate as well. There are certain requirements. Can you maintain the requirements to stay in that community? So,
That is true. And how can I come up with that? Because I can't just pull a number just out of hat and say, "Oh, I have to do this." Well, as a real estate agent, is that your job too to assist in analyzing those costs as well, or is that something you personally do just go the extra mile?
so personally, I always have the conversation up front with my buyers and I tell them, well, okay, have you created a budget? And generally, if they're using and working with one of my preferred lenders, then we're looking at the spreadsheet. We're really looking at, okay, what is it going to cost on average right now? Like, this is where the taxes are because the taxes can kind of go up and we'll find that out closer
Mhm.
to the time of close. If the taxes have, depending on the time of year, like this is what the taxes are. Are you going to have wiggle room in your budget? Because for me, I'm not a one time closer. You close with me and you never see me.
Right.
So a
Some
lot of my
some realtors
clients,
are like that, but
some are
yeah.
like that, but for me, I check in, I see how things are going, and I'm here to be a resource. If you reach out to me and you're trying to do some renovations or you need a contractor, like, I want to keep that relationship with my clients. And I tell them all the time, I do not want to call you and then I find out that your home has been foreclosed on because you can't do X, Y, and Z. So you as the buyer, I can't pick the area for you and say, this is where you should be. I can't do that. You tell me where you desire to be, and then I'm going to work hard to make it happen where we're living in one of those areas that you decide to be in. And then from there, you have to basically decide for yourself, like, is this going to work for me? You can sometimes get like an estimate from the utility companies.
Okay.
But generally speaking, and when you kind of watch the market and like what's going on, I always say when it comes to the taxes, it's really gonna depend on the area, like, do people vote in those areas, with the millages and things like that? Like, are you voting on other things? Are you just in a township? Or are you in the city? It just makes a difference for certain things that could cause your taxes to go up. But
Okay.
you wanna leave wiggle room in your budget, and you also wanna make sure that you look at what is kind of like a static number. And that's why I'm not a huge fan of like adjustable rate mortgages, because now that throws a whole nother monkey wrench into the equation.
Okay.
You have your fixed mortgage. Well, this is the payment I'm paying. And generally, mortgages are 15 to 30-year mortgages, right? You're paying that same amount or close to it, give or take with the tax fluctuation for so many years. But what you wanna consider as well as, and I should backtrack, what's going on in the area? That's one thing that could cause your taxes to go through the roof. Like, if you're building a home in an area that is being revitalized, or it's a lot of new stuff going up in the
Oh,
area, and then it increases your home value by so much.
okay.
That kinda stuff affects your taxes. If you start building additions onto your house, things like that,
But let's say I don't do any of that. I just move in, and then everything is great, it's fine and dandy,
yeah.
and then the following year, I get that letter.
You get that letter. I get that letter, and I mean, honestly, thank God, knock on wood, the letter, is usually like within $100 variance, give
Okay.
or take. It's been less, it's been more over the years. So you just want to adjust accordingly. Unfortunately, it happens. But usually, if it's increasing, it's also following a pattern of your home value is probably increasing. Right?
Yeah.
So you wanna kinda consider that as well. If it's increasing 9 times out of 10, that means you are building much more equity in your home. When you look at when you purchased it and then where you are now, you probably have much more equity.
So, technically, it's not a bad thing if the taxes go up there.
It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's not because they voted for some crazy millage for the science center, or, something going on with the school system, and now you're paying all these taxes for the school to get out of a deficit
Okay.
versus, like
Okay,
it really
okay.
being a benefit on your home, and like what's going on in the neighborhood, right?
Mm,
But you want to consider all those things. And I always say, like, really kinda take a step back and make sure, because generally people say, "Oh, I won't be here long." On average, people stay in their homes for, like, 7 years or so.
mhm,
So, you may be there longer than you expect,
okay.
and if you are there longer than you expect, are you gonna be comfortable with that?
So, that is a good question, and that's a question that is up to that person, obviously,
Absolutely.
because neighborhoods change, of course, and people have kids, and of course, you have to consider schools and school districts. So, of course, that can change too. Um, but let me back up real quick because you said that some people forego the private inspection, and I'm kind of baffled as to why someone would forego the private inspection if it can save me a headache on the back end. Because this is a big investment. This is
Absolutely.
this is a lot of money
It's a
that I'm
lot of
putting up.
money.
So are people foregoing because of the cost of it, or what's the reason that you think?
Generally, buyers forego a home inspection because they're trying to get their offer accepted. In a market like a seller's market, in the height of COVID, people were waiving inspections, offering appraisal guarantees, which are basically where the buyer agrees to pay a certain amount if the home doesn't appraise up to a certain dollar value. Let's say, for example, somebody offers a $10,000 appraisal guarantee.
Mhm.
Well, if the appraiser goes out and what the buyer has offered doesn't meet, it's below, like the appraised value is below what the buyer has offered, then the buyer is willing to bring an additional 10K to the table to cover that difference.
Gotcha.
And so people did that kind of stuff at the height of COVID. And honestly, I kind of feel like we are back in a scenario where it feels a little bit like COVID. It's just in a different
Hmm,
kind of way because the interest rates are not 3%. They're
mhm.
6 and a quarter, 7%. And it's like, okay, still not enough homes for all of the buyers that are shopping. So you have to get creative. And those are some of the ways buyers decide to get creative. But there's ways when you're working with a great real estate professional to still have the house inspected even if you decide to waive the private inspection. But I would definitely say, I tell my clients, if you're a builder, if you are a savvy investor, or you have an eye and you already know, like going in this, you're very good with repairs.
Mhm.
Maybe that's something you can afford to do.
Okay.
First time home buyer, strapped for cash, using a first time home buyer program. Absolutely. That's not a
No.
good idea.
Okay. And so because of that, and you said because you feel like you're kind of in COVID again because of the interest rates and things of that nature, there, I have noticed. I don't know if I'm using the verbiage correctly. First right refusal. So I've noticed that there are some people that they'll sell their home. I'll sell my home to you. I won't even list it. If you're interested, I'll sell you my home. We'll work it out, and it's yours. How does that affect the buyer? Also, I know it's one of those things like buyer beware type thing, but before it hits the market, you want to buy it, I'll let you buy it without the inspection or anything like that. I've seen that rise a little bit. Has that something that you've noticed at all, or
I actually recently sold a house where we were listed in coming soon status. So coming soon means that the house is not available for um, showings, but a buyer can make an offer sight unseen. It can get accepted.
okay,
And once you get it accepted, then the buyer would see the house for the first time. And so I recently, I closed one that was like that. I worked for the seller and the house was in coming soon status, never made it out of coming soon, and it went under contract and closed. So you just want to make sure if you are doing something like that, as a buyer, that expectation would come from somebody that is a little more of a savvy home buyer.
okay,
They are not, this isn't their first rodeo, because I had some of my first time home buyers approaching me with scenarios like to do things like that. Now, one thing you mentioned basically is like either for sale by owner, where they're selling themselves for sale by owner
mhm,
and someone approaches them and they just work it. They don't put it on the MLS or anything like that. And then you have some where we consider them off market as well, where I work as the buyer's agent. I approach a seller. My buyer's interested in purchasing your home, and we make the offer and go through that process. And we take it from there. I've closed deals like that as well.
okay.
So,
You make it sound so easy because there are some people that they try to do it themselves because like technology and Zillow. It's like, oh, I can do this all by
absolutely.
myself. So it sounds like that you're very much needed because there are some things that I would not have thought of. Like you brought up the yard, of course the heating in December and February in Michigan.
Yeah.
Never would have thought about that. Heating a 3,000 square foot house is a lot different than heating up your 900 square foot apartment. Um, which brings me to this. There are some people that they're renting and their rent is maybe 2,600 bucks a month, but they aren't strong enough, whether it's credit wise or anything, to purchase a home. Yet there are some people with mortgages and the mortgage is like 800 bucks a month
Right.
or $1,000 a month. And their rent is just keeps going up.
Absolutely.
2,600 this year, it's going to be 27 or 2,800 next year. And they're trying to save for
Absolutely.
a house.
Yes.
And their buddy is like, "Oh, I picked this one up and my mortgage, I own it for less than $1,000 a month." Oh, is there any type of help or for someone out there who's frustrated with the fact that they're paying all this money in rent and they want a home? Granted, with rent, I don't have to worry about if the roof leaks or something like that. The landlord takes care of it. But I don't own it. I'm pretty much flushing my money down the toilet, so to speak. Whereas in a home, I get equity out of it.
Right. So, yeah, so there are certain lenders that can help with things like that. So I always say, I know you mentioned one thing at the beginning about like, so I wouldn't say that I'm a credit specialist. I do help my clients and navigate them through the process, but I am
Tiff,
definitely
you're OG in credit. You you
so
you you know what to do. Like, hey,
so
save here, budget here. That's gonna
I
help.
do,
Yeah.
but you know what I say? I say managing your money properly. The um what word am I looking for? Like the benefit of doing that is that your credit will just be great.
Correct. Correct.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you manage your money, you don't co-sign for people, you stay within your budget, and it all really goes back to a budget. If you really look at what's going in, what's coming in, what's going out,
Mhm.
then it's really going to help. If I look at your credit report, that's gonna tell me a lot about your values.
Gotcha. So
And oh, I'm sorry.
no, no, go ahead, go right ahead, girl.
So with that, there are programs, there are lenders that I work with, and I always look at when a buyer comes to me and they say, I'm interested in purchasing a home, then I will ask a lot of questions to really kind of find out what I can do to help them. What do they need? Some people just need me to say, hey, let's get you on a budget and then you're good to go. You have the income, you have the credit score, you just like to shop. So that's it. You know, you don't have all the debt. We don't have to worry about that. And then for others, it's like, okay, I'm going to connect you with this lender. They specialize in first time homebuyer programs, specifically catered for what you're looking to accomplish because you need some money towards your closing costs. So we have those conversations. And it goes back to I've never had a buyer that really wants to be a homeowner that if they follow the process, they're not in a home. Some, it may take a year and a half. But again, if you're diligent with that process,
Mhm.
then you will be rewarded and we will find you a house. We will find you a house. But you can't come to me. You don't pay any of your bills on time. You've co-signed for everybody in your family. And then you want a mortgage company to entrust, you want them to entrust you and say, hey, like I'm gonna give you $200,000 and $300,000 and expect you to actually pay your house note on time.
Yeah, and so budgeting. Let's change gears from real estate to budgeting because you love the budget.
I love
I
the
you,
budget.
so
Teach me how to budget.
okay. Let's not do that again. So with budgeting, what I found, no one really said, well, except my dad. My dad taught me how to write my first check with NBD Bank. So my dad taught me how to write my first check, which was cool. I learned how to balance a checkbook. And then outside of that, for me, what I found personally to create a budget for me was I had to take a look and see how much money I was making. And then I had to separate my base salary from any type of overtime or commissions or anything. I just had to go off my base salary.
Right.
And then I had to look at everything that I was spending. I don't care if it was a McDonald's sandwich that I got every day before work. I had to put that in there. And looking at what I was spending versus what I was taking in, if I included my commissions or overtime, whatever the case is, if I included it, oh, we live in comfy, we're good. But if I based it just off of my salary, just my base salary, I found that I was in the red
Mm-hmm.
a lot. So I had to cut out some spending. There's some stuff that I had to cut out. And some people don't want to do that. I had to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a little bit. Instead of going out to eat every day, every other week, or going out with friends and everything, I had to kind of look at the numbers and say, this isn't going to last. In creating a budget, are you finding that some people are kind of withholding some of their vices and not including it in their budget when you're looking at their spreadsheets and you're trying to figure out what goes out? It's like, well, you buy purses twice a month. Oh yeah, I need those. I need those. But no, we gotta cut that down because $100 purse can do the same as a $2,000 purse. So honesty is a big thing though when creating a budget, don't you think?
I do. So I, at one point, had a business where, like a financial coaching business, where I had clients and I specifically coached them on personal finance, saving, paying off debt. I no longer have that business and I solely focus my time on selling real estate. So when my clients come to me, they don't know a lot of times that I have that background.
Okay.
But in some scenarios, I will coach them, but it's never to the point where I'm looking at their ins and outs extensively like I did when I had clients and I was
Gotcha.
coaching them personally. Um, I would say that things change when people truly start holding themselves accountable, though, because it's like I said, okay, I want to get back in shape. And for me, it was like, okay, I know I want to be at this weight by this amount of time. And I was like, okay, I got to get back in my cycle classes. And then I said, well, you know what? I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to go to a 6 o'clock class. Like, okay. Okay. Okay, that
Okay.
alarm.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 in the morning, okay.
6 in the morning. Okay. That means I need to be at the gym by like 15 minutes till if I want to get the bike I want.
Right.
So, like that accountability, right? And now every single time I get ready to put that, like drink that slush or like get some ice cream, I'm like, is it worth that work? It's really the same thing.
Okay.
Like, oh, I want a house. That sounds sexy. Are you willing to do the work? Because ultimately, whatever it is that you truly, truly want, like you'll make it happen. And
Of
it's
course,
gonna,
of course.
and what I've come to at this point in my business, especially now that I am working with more sellers, um, and a little more seller heavy, is that if you really, really, really want to have that house, like I want to help you get there, but I can't want it more than you.
Right.
I
Right.
can't be more motivated than you are to make that happen. Because if you're not motivated, it's not going to work. If you don't really want the house, then you're not going to get the house. And I'm not going to spend my time trying to tell people why they should do that. You know what I
Correct.
mean? Like if you aren't ready, you're not ready. But if you're ready, we're going to make it happen. But you are going to have to be honest with yourself. And ultimately, it's just for a short period of time. I mean, because with a couple tweaks, you may find that you like it there better, right? Like you may find you really like having money in the bank rather than cut the check to everybody at the end of the month.
Correct,
But
correct.
lenders, and you brought up a point that I didn't want to kind of like overlook. So lenders look at, I'll say my lenders that I refer my clients to. They're going to be looking at that 40, that base salary, whether it's 40-hour a week if you're working hourly or if it's salary, they're looking at that base. The overtime, that stuff's a bonus, right? So I always tell my buyers, you use that bonus money to put in a cushion for the house, for the down payment, for the closing costs. But when a lender is looking at your portfolio, they're looking at that base because that's the guarantee. And it's the same way with debt, unfortunately. You could have debt as far as like student loans, and you could have that in forbearance. And buyers will say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that right now. I'm not paying it right now. I'm not paying that $2,000, student loan a month right now. No, but the lender's looking at that because during that 30-year mortgage, oh, it's coming back into the picture.
Okay. Okay.
So again, the numbers don't lie. So let's just look at let's put everything on the table and let's decide the best way to put you in a position to win. Not only the offer and get it accepted, not only to win by closing, but to win by being able to comfortably maintain your home.
So, are you finding that there's a certain demographic that rents more than owning? Because there are a lot of people that feel as though but redlining was a real thing. And so there are some people that don't want to purchase a home out of fear of redlining. There are some people that don't want to purchase a home out of fear of the maintenance. There are some people that just they grew up renting. Mom
Mhm.
and dad rented, grandpa rented, whatever the case is. How important is home ownership to certain people as far as creating a legacy or wealth? Or does it even have that type of impact?
That is a great question. So statistically, I'm not going to quote a number because
Okay.
I'm not sure what that number is, but I will say overall. So when I initially introduced myself, I said I'm a realtor and I'm also a realtist. So with the realtist piece, many years ago, African Americans could not be real estate agents. They couldn't be realtors.
Yeah.
And so what happened was an organization, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and it's NAREB is what it's short for,
Yeah.
was created as a safe space so that African Americans, along with other minorities, could sell real estate and also help with this whole crisis of Black people being able to purchase and own homes. And even to this day, when you look at the numbers and the staggering differences between minorities, African Americans, and others compared to maybe their Caucasian counterparts, is that there is a staggering gap. And a huge part of building wealth, when you look at it, that home ownership piece is a part of it. It's a
Exactly.
huge part of it. So the largest asset that a lot of people have is what?
Oh,
The home. And if you don't own a house, let's take a step back and look at the neighborhood. Is it more likely that a renter is going to maintain their house or that a homeowner is going to maintain their home? So when you start looking at certain areas and who's moving in, who's moving out, and why. And so we really have to, number one, like dig deep and say, what is it that we need to do? Is it access? Is it education? And that's where, being a realtist, I'm very proud of that because our goal is to help build home ownership in the Black community and amongst other minorities. That is the goal. And that is what we're doing. And so that is one piece of it. And I think that in this day and age where information is so present, if Martin Luther King and if all of those of the past only looked at everything as an obstacle and never said, I'm going to try, there would never be a first. So we have to be a first. Why not be the first homeowner in your, you know, cousin tree? Why not be a
Right.
first home in your sibling tree? Whatever it is, but we have to say, okay, what do I need to do to get here? And there are plenty of people willing to support you in that process, but you got to raise your hand. You got to say, hey, I want to make this happen and I'm willing to do the work. And for those clients that I have that are willing to do the work to say, I'm the first to do this, like it is such a great and awesome, I'm honored to be a part of their journey. But more importantly, I know the doors that's going to open because I have clients now where they're bringing their kids are buying with me, 20 years old.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
20. I wish I bought my house at 20.
Right. Right.
And the equity to be able to turn around and sell it and use that money for something else, like it's just so many things. So what I would encourage somebody to do is to say, let's not look at, oh my God, what hurdles am I going to have to jump through? Just raise your hand, be willing and committed to do the work.
So with with putting in the work and home ownership, my last point is trust. Putting a home in a trust, leaving it for the next one. How important is that? And then lastly, what would you tell your younger self or someone that's in your exact same position? They're watching saying, she looks just like me. She's where I'm from. And how can I jump up and change someone's life for the better? And then also property and trust.
So the property and trust, that is definitely something that I would say you want to talk to legal counsel and you also want to talk to your accountant.
Okay.
You want to look at the tax ramifications of doing that. The benefits of putting your home in a trust, making sure that if you have a mortgage still on the property, that you can actually do that without making the mortgage become due. Like you want to look at all the ins and outs of that process and what that looks like. And overall, what is your why? Right? Does that make sense for you, where you are and what you're looking to accomplish? So that's where I would always recommend and draw into the picture, like I said, a lawyer, an attorney, and then also a CPA that's going to give you the tax ramifications of what that looks like and what you need to make sure that you're following
Okay.
before you decide to do that. And so for some, it may be great. For others, they may realize it may not be the best route for them. My younger self, I would tell my younger self, instead of using my cash to cash flow grad school, to purchase my first condo. That's what I would tell my younger
Mm.
self. I would have done that instead. And I would have gotten a great deal. I would have built a lot of equity and I would have been able to use that cash to pull it out to purchase a second home. So, and I would have just been able to, if possible, if the bylaws permit it, just lease that out. So that would be my younger self. I would always say like, and to my younger self, I was so committed to paying off debt and to being debt free that sometimes I let that get in the way of like what the numbers were saying was a good option. There are moments and times where paying off debt is great, but some opportunities may arise, such as, during the bottom of the recession, I could have purchased a condo at a very reasonable price and used the proceeds from that to really build um, my financial portfolio. So paying off debt versus putting more money in my retirement, like what made sense? And so you really want to look at those numbers and I would just say don't be afraid to kind of take that leap and really just be willing to get out of your comfort zone because that's where you're growing and that's where usually you're on the brink of something good when you jump out of your comfort zone, but not jumping out without wisdom. Like you want to consult people that are wise, not people that don't have anything, not people that are not doing anything or not where you want to be, but you consult people that are where you wanna be, and you ask them those questions,
Right,
you know,
right.
and you listen and be a student. Forever be a student and be open, because that's what I find in each deal. Each deal is different. I don't care. Each deal is different. Something I learned something from every deal. And as long as I stay open, like, it's like, "Oh my God, like, this is great." Like, it's just it could be one little bitty thing that I get. But and that's one thing I love about real estate. So, be open to learning, be willing to take the risk, and be willing to put in the like, just make sure that you don't just be so focused on one thing that you miss, like, the return. You know, you don't wanna spend 50 you're I can't know how to put it. Like, just make sure you look at all your
No,
options.
yeah, you're right about that as far as paying off debt and then buying that property. It would have been I could use some of that equity
Yeah.
to pay
Y
off some of that debt.
Some opportunities only come up once, right?
Yes.
And you learn from that. So just be willing to jump out there and take the leap.
Well, thank you. I
Thank you so
appreciate you for
much.
coming out. And then that's it. That's it with Tiffany Jones. Of course, she's going to, or she did, show us how to budget. Show us how to budget. Is that oh, I'm sorry, I've been to the short abouts. Been to the short about. Thank y'all. Until next time, this is Backyard Dollars.